Okay, awesome. So again, welcome everybody. This presentation is do you build in Drupal 8 or do you wait? How to plan and get ready for going from 7 to 8 or 9. Does that work? Let's see here. Does that work? Yes. Okay, I guess I'll do. So this is me. I'm very blurry here. I look like I'm very tan. But I'm the CEO and founder of Kanopi Studios. I've been doing Drupal for about 10 years. I started in the area of 4.6, and I've lived through many, many migrations. Kanopi Studios, we build and support websites for clients that want to make a positive impact in the world. And we do everything from all the creative suite of services, and then we move into continuous improvement, or what we call support. So again, I really want to make sure that people have a really good experience with Drupal and open source, and I meet a lot of people that come to my company that say, oh, I just hate Drupal, it's so hard to use. And sometimes they've just had a bad experience. So I'm always working to create a better experience with Drupal, so I'm always happy to help or provide resources. If you want more help with this, if you want to find out how to do an audit or any of the stuff we talk about, you're welcome to book a session right with me. I do 50-minute solution sessions for free, and I book about an hour of those every week for the community. So if you ever need help with anything, my door's always open. And if I don't know the answer, I have a great team of people and a great community that can get us the answers that we need. Okay, so we're not going to have enough time to do who's in the room. I seriously thought I'd have like 5 people at this slot at this time of day, so I'm so excited to see so many people. So just a quick show of hands. How many people here still have a Drupal 7 site right now that they're supporting? Most of us in this room. How many people have a Drupal 8 site already that they're working with? How many people have both a Drupal 7 and a Drupal 8 site? Okay, cool. So just a couple of like polls of hands. What did you folks come here to learn, or what is your one key takeaway that you're hoping to get out of this?
Strategies for moving from Drupal 7 to 8 or something that is new.
Okay, some strategies on how to move. Great. Anybody else? Yeah.
I have a lot of stakeholders to convince.
Okay, stakeholders to convince. We touched on that in the very end. So I was going to do a whole session on how to convince your boss to go to Drupal 8, but we can do that another session. But I got some ideas for there.
It comes up as a question whenever I'm starting a new project.
Right, okay. How to handle it at the beginning of the project?
Pitfalls and caveats for moving.
Okay, that's good. Okay, this is good. So I'm going to try to kind of dovetail on some of the stuff and kind of dig in some places that are a little deeper, and we'll see what time we have at the end to leave off for some Q&A. So just a little bit about Kanopi Studios, just real quickly, is our holistic approach really infuses the strategy and creative thinking throughout the whole stage of a site's life to make sure that the site is continuously improved upon. I always say the first day that your site goes live is actually the first day of the start of your project. Up until then, it's been a lot of strategic planning. So when you think about, how to handle your site over the long term, I always think of it's really important to manage the UX and the strategy throughout the life cycle of the project. And why I'm bringing this up is I wanted to quickly a little bit talk about how we solve some problems at Kanopi Studios, and I have 3 pillars that kind of goes across all things that we do. We have a motto of small bites, big wins. And we believe that working with our clients, that when you have like a Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 site, we're going to talk about how you can implement some of these philosophies of small bites, big wins. Another one is matching and meeting pace. And this is meant to be also from the technology standpoint, from the client needs, from the user needs. Just building a website and putting it out there is just not good enough these days. You really have to meet and match the needs of your users or your stakeholders and keep pace with technology. And the third one is that we really want to plan for the long term. So when we take these small bites for those big wins, and we really think about where we need to match and meet pace with our clients or the technology, and we're also planning for the long term, if we can take these kind of 3 mental models and apply it to a lot of the things that we're doing, we're creating a lot of client success, and we're really taking that holistic picture. So why do you actually care about this? So a lot of you folks, including us at Kanopi Studios, we have a lot of Drupal 7 sites. And so today we want to talk about some small things you can do, or those small bites, to move that forward. We also want to talk about the flow of Drupal 8 coming out and Drupal 9 and what that means. And then we're also going to talk about the planning for the long term, so you and your boss or your stakeholders don't freak out, because we want to minimize the stress and maximize the fun, which means making sure we have some strategic planning. So there's some news that came out that when Drupal 9 is going to be released, both Drupal 7 and 8 will be end of life of November 1st, 2021. When I mentioned this in the SF Drupal user group this night, when it launched, almost you should have seen people's eyes. Like they started freaking out. And I think, the big thing here is that people are like, what? Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 are becoming end of life at the same time? Everyone's like, oh my goodness, what are we gonna do? But good news, it's all gonna be okay. So what first off, why it's gonna be okay is Kanopi Studios, we're personally committed to being a long-term support provider in Drupal 7. But what is even more magical is Dries has committed to backwards compatibility. And I'm sure you folks know about this in the room already, but what this means is it's pretty much going to be this magical little button. So when you're going from 8 to 9, it's going to be much like a version upgrade, less the deprecated code. So Symfony 3 is becoming end of life, and that's why Drupal 8 is going to be end of life at the same time as Drupal 9. So what Drupal 9 takes is they take out all the deprecated code, they put the new code in there, and they can release on 9. So that means 9 should be almost an identical release to the last Drupal 8 release, minus the deprecated code. So upgrading from 8 to 9 should be just about as easy as upgrading between minor versions in 8. That's huge! That's huge! That's like, yay, Drupal! Because, working both in WordPress and Drupal, WordPress has always had backwards compatibility. So you have someone who's dealt with the Drupal 6 to 7 migration, and now they're faced with paying another big chunk of change to go to a 7 to an 8. The nice thing is you can talk to your stakeholders and say, it's the last time we got to do this. And really it's like that technical evolution of the way that Drupal's changed is going to facilitate backwards compatibility. So we shouldn't see these major version upgrades, which is causing a lot of stress and pain on us and our finances and everything. So 7 to 8 is really going to give the last big jump where you're going to need to do a lot of dev efforts. And then we'll move into 9, and 9 is going to give us a clean slate, and we're really going to keep on innovating, but without reinventing the wheel, because Drupal likes to reinvent the wheel every version. And if you're kind of thinking about this, I know a lot of people are feeling anxious, and Drupal 8's been out for a long time, but there's still many more Drupal 7 sites than there are Drupal 8 sites. You can see down here, this is, and I'm just pointing to the screen here, that Drupal 5, thank goodness, is almost off the map, right? How many people here still have a Drupal 5 site hiding somewhere? Good, yay, go you, right? You wouldn't believe, we have clients come to Kanopi and they say, I have a Drupal 5 site. And I'm like, oh my goodness, how are you okay? But you can see here, we've got our Drupal 7 sites, and our Drupal 8 is just starting to crest up here. It's really hard to see the color contrast on the screen, but the slides will be available. And it's this is a very common graph on the internet. This should say Drupal 8. Okay, but what if you have a Drupal 7 site today? Essentially, we've been told that end of life is in 3 years. 3 years, 4 days, to be specific. That may change. Drupal's known for pushing timelines. But generally, remember, it's all going to be okay. And specifically, we're looking at the average life cycle of a website is about 3 years. I think in a lot of ways we're very fortunate. We can extend the life of our Drupal site sometimes to 5 years. I know clients that seem even to be able to make 7 to 10 years out of their site. But actually the average across the globe is 3 years. So if we think if we're in Drupal 7 now, and if we've had our Drupal 7 site for 2 to 3 years, and maybe we're going to keep it for 2 or 3 more, we're actually getting the full life cycle out of our Drupal 7 site. Now, when it comes down to it, if you've got a Drupal 7 site, the question really is what do I do with this site right now, right? Is it time that we should just do a focus fix? Should we actually just keep our Drupal 7 site? It might not always possible, but it might be a good way to maximize your investment, because if you really think the life of our website, having it last 2 more years might be a good place for you, and then you can really focus on, setting yourself up well financially to do the rebuild I call it 8/9. Because once you move to 8, you're almost to 9, right? It's not like you have to wait for 9. You're almost better to move to 8, so when it comes to 9, it's just a push of a button. You're not going, oh, I gotta move to 9, I gotta move to 9. But sometimes it's not realistic to move, right? So how do we maximize our current investment? And then sometimes, when is it actually time for a rebuild? When is it time to throw out that code? Maybe that Drupal 7 site is really crusty. Maybe you want to go through a full redesign, and if that case, you're going to be retheming your Drupal 7 site. You might as well just go on to 8 and retheme it in 8. If you're just going to do some visual enhancements and you're going to tweak a few things, might be best to stay on 7 and then do a more strategic rebranding, reimagining of the site later on. There's also, I think a lot of people forget about what I call the total cost of ownership of a website. A lot of people, when they're thinking of evaluating how much it's going to cost to build a Drupal 8 or 9 or retheme or whatever they're thinking about, they often only think of the dollar and cents that they're paying now or they paid before. And so when you're working with stakeholders on trying to get buy-in, the total cost of ownership is something that a lot of people don't consider. So for example, I had this lovely Drupal 7 client. They were very keen to get onto Drupal 8. They called me up and they said, okay, well, how much is this going to cost, right? And they've got 12 sub-themes and 40 content types, and their site's fairly massive. I said, well, it's going to be like 60 to 100K. And oh, wow, that's so much. I don't know, we can't do that. I said, okay, wait a minute. How long did it take you to migrate from 6 to 7? Well, it took us about a year and a half. And how many people worked on that? Oh, 2. And how much time? Oh, we worked on it full time. And how much did you guys get paid? Oh. So you take their salary for 2 people over the course of a year and a half working full time, and the things that they weren't able to work on instead of working on their Drupal 7 site, all of a sudden the 60 to 100K to pay to an agency to keep their plates clear all of a sudden made sense to their boss. To say, oh, I don't, otherwise I'd be paying you folks 2 years of salary and I'd lose you for 2 years while you built this because they were new at Drupal and they would take their time. But that's one thing that when I'm talking to stakeholders about the total cost of ownership, sometimes they think, oh, I've only spent $50,000 on my site 5 years ago, or for $5,000 on my site 5 years ago. I don't want to spend anything on it now, but if you show them how much time goes in on like the staff level and how much time goes in from, if it takes, you have a meeting and you have 6 people in the room, right? You also have to count those meetings with all those people too. So the good thing about being in 7 and not being in crusty 6 or 5 is that you're in a really stable version. And whatever you do today can improve your tomorrow, whether you stay in 7 or whether you choose to move to 8. So the rest of this presentation is going to be kind of talking about tips and tactics that you can do to improve your Drupal 7 site to make it ready for 8. And this is stuff that we take on, kind of when I showed you that circle. In our build side of things, we just do this naturally, right? We do that at the beginning of every project. You do research, you do discovery, you design. But if you have an existing code base, sometimes you're just doing those hot fixes. So if you can get back into that strategic mindset, you can actually improve your Drupal 7 site, improve your base. So when you move to 8, it's much more of not a reimagining the whole thing, it's much a porting at that point because you've done some of those critical thinking moments. So when we look at like optimal website health, we're really looking at both the smart side of the UX and making sure the UX is smart, as well as you have a strong technical foundation. And that really comes into, I'm going to break that down a little bit further. So really, I'm always believing on focusing on what's most important. So when it comes to starting with your website strategy. So if you're in a Drupal 7 site and you say, okay, what am I going to do with this, right? First off, you actually understand, like, what is the purpose of the website? What do you need to actually, what is it supposed to achieve? Is it achieving those goals? Did a website just get thrown up and then it got left alone for a while? So kind of like uncovering and figuring out what's the goal for the website. Is it hitting its objective? Is really powerful to help manage those stakeholders and move a process forward. Because you can say, hey, we wanted to get X number of students to apply, or we want to get X number of conversions. It looks like we're only getting this. What are we going to do to improve that? So starting to pull out and talking to stakeholders about what the actual goals for the sites are and are we hitting them? You may also have humans that are frustrated. If you have a customer service department or you have an accounts team that manages your clients, they've probably heard frustrations. So kind of digging around in your organization to figure out where the website's working and where it's not. We really like to make things very realistic in terms of when we create goals with our clients. At the outset of any project, we create SMART goals, which SMART goals simply mean specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And that gives us something that we can actually chew on versus saying, like, I want to be the best at this. Like, that's so obscure, right? But if you could say something that is concrete and start rallying around what your goals are for the website, if your website's already hitting all your goals, you're probably in a good place to just stay in 7 and like make sure you tune up and then make a progressive move in the right direction. If it's like so off mark and you're not hitting your goals, you're not talking to audiences, it's not working, you may want to think about a reimagine, which may then push you more into the rebuild a little sooner. But again, you have 3 years, so you don't need to stress about it. You just need to plan for it, because usually it takes about, 3 to 6 to 12 months to get funding. And then it takes 3 to 6 to 12 months to do a professional build the right way. So that gives us about a year wiggle room. And we really don't want to be butting up against the end of life, because if anybody was bumping up at the end of life of 6, it can be a little stressful. So you also want to do your homework. So it's one thing to talk to your stakeholders and your folks to actually understand what the purpose of the site and if it's hitting their goals, but to also dig into your users and really think like them, put them in your put their shoes on and walk around for a bit. And you can do this really affordably. You can spend a little bit of time on research. You can spend a lot of time on research, but I would say just don't skip it. Do some. Because really the humans that are going to be using your site are the ones that are going to really improve your processes and your design thinking. So you may want to dive deep into analytics. That's a nice lightweight way to start seeing. And you want to actually dig in and say, what are you tracking and why? And starting to figure out that maybe you need to set up some better Google Analytics tracking to actually see what conversions are happening and where people are going. You can also do heat maps. How many people in here use Hotjar? A couple. So Hotjar is a very affordable tool that allows for a bunch of different things. One of our favorite things is heat mapping. So it actually shows, like Google Analytics tracks where the mouse clicks. Heat map shows where the person doesn't click, and they hover and they spend time. You can also implement a very low cost, low impact survey. So when someone's going to X away from your browser, you can have a little pop-up question, which is really powerful, and you say, what did you come here for today? And you'll notice that simple one-sentence question will give you a lot of data. We work with Golden Gate National Parks, and all their stakeholders wanted this program, this volunteer initiative. All the stakeholders had all these ideas on what they wanted, and then we did the user research to that one question. 50 to 60% of the people that go to the parks website is looking for what's happening today in the parks, right? The stakeholders even think about that. So we're able to align the stakeholder needs with the user wants and get powerful information to that user that's coming for day of. What's the temperature, alerts, activities, and then Marcom got all this extra space to be like, and look at all our programs while you're here, right? So it accomplished both needs. So it's kind of really listening to your users, make sure that you don't just build a pretty site, you actually build something that works. You can do tons of user testing for cheap. Unless you are selling to a pharmaceutical sales rep, generally your audience is pretty normal. We're normal people, right? So even asking friends and family, you can do some, printouts and even stand on the street corner and be like, if you were going to go to find the blog, where would you go? It's amazing what you can do for free or very cheap. You can also hire people and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on this. But I always say, just even if you can only do a little bit, do something, because it's really valuable. The next one is content, right? We work in content management systems. So all tech stuff aside, what you can do in your Drupal 7 site today is start cleaning up your content. And that means you want to have quick page loads, you want to have targeted content strategy, you really want to understand, if you understand the goals and the users, you can make sure you have the right content on the right page. You can also test, if you're in your Drupal 7 site, you can try different things without the expense of rebuilding an A. You can say, okay, we think it might be more like this. You can create a new view, you can create some new content types, you can actually manage it in D7, test to see if people like that flow and that content strategy, if it's working. Then when you go to 8, you have some tried and tested, and you say, okay, this is definitely what we're keeping, this is definitely what we're leaving. You also want to think about your mobile content strategy. Most people, mobile was an afterthought. I work in an agency, and 5 years ago, the clients were, cool, can I just cut responsive to save money? And I was like, no, you can't do that. And thank goodness we were advocates for that, because nowadays mobile has become such a huge part of SEO that you really want to think about your mobile content strategy. So because if you already have an existing Drupal 7 site, instead of putting the pressure on the 8 build to get all the strategy stuff right, getting some of this right in Drupal 7 makes that 7 to 8 a lot smoother. Also, I love building websites, but hashtag humans. All these humans get involved, right? And then sometimes it gets sticky. So if you can get some of those humans, like those stakeholders, bought in, and really we're proving that we've got better conversion because we've updated our content strategy, we've targeted how we're going to talk to our users from our user research, they're much more bought into our rebuilds because they see the power of what's happening and you can show the impact. Definitely I'd recommend one of the first things to do is just a content audit. Like go through, check what's working, check what's not, and then other things that you want to consider is also accessibility and SEO. So you can do a lot on your Drupal 7 site. It might not be totally accessible right now, and making some of those adjustments, especially on the content side, that all carries over. So when you like rename all your images to have the proper like title and alt tag, and if you kind of structure, you make sure that if a content editor has gone in there and just put like a wall of text, and then instead of using the H3s and all the headings, they've just bolded and, you know, go and clean up that content now so that when you migrate to 8, that stuff is already well structured. And I also think that you can do stuff now with like speeding up your page speed and making sure that your site is very performant now so that you can start like really making sure, you know, check where people are falling off, check your analytics. You want to check your tech stack, you know, how many database queries are you getting? Do you have a clunky theme? You know, sometimes there's simple fixes, just like image size and script CSS aggregation, and just doing that on your Drupal 7 site makes it a nicer, cleaner place to be. Okay, so let's get into the most important parts of the technical foundation. So this is very much, I think SEO lands on both the non-technical and the technical side of things. But when we're thinking about SEO, we really want to have a good base to work from. So, you know, if you don't already have a responsive design on Drupal 7, that might push you to move to 8 pretty quickly because it's so important to have a responsive, optimized website. And no longer can you just stack mobile content. You really need to be conscious about the mobile user, right? They don't actually want to see your 7 heroes and then some promo stuff and then whatever crap, because that's how it was ordered on your homepage. That makes sense maybe on the homepage on the desktop, but when you just stack it, it's kind of like, oh, it's like taking a sandwich and just kind of be like, okay, I'll put the meat over here. It's not very thoughtful. So if you can really think about your mobile content strategy, if you already have a responsive website, it's a good opportunity to tweak and move the layout of things to see how it's best converting. And then that goes, again, once you go into Drupal 8 at that point, you already know what works and what doesn't, and it reduces the amount of risk in doing some of these big rebuilds. You can also structure your content. A lot of new things are coming out. I just learned that you can put this fancy thing in your Google Tag Manager with your header. Like, there's new things that are coming out all the time. So keeping your site up to date with these is, again, it's going to port nicely. It's just like anything. You stay behind, you know, you don't do a run for 6 months, and the first time you go for a run, you feel like you're going to die. Versus if you run every morning or every couple days, you know, you just get better and better. So keep working on your site, even though it's in 7. Even if you're going to throw it out, you know, it's worth, especially because in Drupal to Drupal, it's a lot better than crazy custom Perl system to Drupal. It's a lot easier transition. So anything you do now is really going to set you a good foundation. You can also check your code quality, where you're looking at your scripting standards, right? Does it actually meet these things? You can look at your front end standards. You know, is it well structured and easy to extend? And, you know, if there's any patches or, you know, just kind of looking at your technical foundation, that if you do decide to stay in 7 for another year or two, you have a really strong place to work from. You're not kind of shooting yourself in the foot. Another thing that I find very helpful when we adopt Drupal 7 sites that are going to be targeted for a Drupal 8 migration is we actually start with a lot of documentation. Very, 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 very infrequently do we ever adopt sites that have good documentation. And so what we do is that really creates a really solid foundation, because the people that are involved in the project then understand what's happening, why it's happening. And you want to do like on the project level, but also on the component level and the code level. So anywhere that we can kind of put this documentation in leaves a path or leaves information for the person who's going to be doing the rebuilds. Sometimes we go all the way even up at the project level. We go one more level up where we're looking at how does this feature hit the business goals and how does it relate back to our SMART goals? And does it actually help us convert or help us move forward? So if there's certain things that provides the person on the developer level still understands what we're doing at the business level, so that we create, we kind of create clarity and cleanup in this process. Because what happens is when we go through all the old stuff and we try to look at it and document it, we often say, what are we using this for? What is it? What is the purpose? Does this fit our goals? Yes or no? And what happens? We start purging, right? You know, before you move, you try to like purge stuff out of your house. You don't have to move so much. It's kind of like that, both on the content level, the SEO, and on the code level, because there might be stuff that the way you've structured it in D7, you can restructure it so it moves better into 8. Okay, so some of the key takeaways that I've got here is that you really can lower your risk with a site cleanup. And this is huge. Like, we have a lot of 7 sites that do come into our queue that are a little hot mess, right? They edit a block and the whole thing goes white screen of death. Like, we've seen these kind of crazy things. So actually doing code cleanup gives you some stability to move over. And also if the code that you've got is, you know, something that maybe it was one of your first Drupal sites, you probably under all those modules that you didn't use, like uninstall all those modules, clean it all up. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a better sense of understanding of what you've got to work with. And if you're also doing a site cleanup with accessibility and SEO, your site's actually going to do better in the short term, as well as you'll have a good strategy for the long term. I have seen a lot of clients rush their projects. Clients always say, how long is this going to take? And I said, well, it depends on how fast you move, but we'll match and meet pace. We'll work with you. But generally, projects take anywhere between 3 months and 12 months. If someone comes and says they can do the entire content strategy, research, design, development in 3 months, I would be a little nervous, because the amount of time that it takes for the creative process, you have to leave that time so the creative folks have time to be creative. If you know, and it's tricky. I mean, when you're working in an agency and you've got deadlines like this, you know, we've got to keep things on track. So if you, as a person who owns a site, you can take a nice deep breath and do this methodically, step by step, it's actually better for your bottom line. As soon as you're rushing and you're frantic, things get missed, quality drops, people are stressed out, they don't do their best work. So if you can also get this organized early on, and if you are planning to move to 8, starting within the next year is a really good place, because you'll have 2 full years before it's end of life. Unfortunately, you know, there will be Drupal 7 long-term support providers like us and like others, so you actually can even say, oh, there will be support out there. Like, I won't be totally abandoned, I won't be left high and dry. But planning this with a realistic budget and a realistic timeline is going to help you manage risk. And this is where I talk a little bit about invest and plan for the total cost of ownership, right? Like a Drupal site, you know, building a new site in Drupal 7, if it only had 1 or 2 content types, would be choo-choo-choo-choo. But we have all these wonderful complex client needs or user needs, and we end up with more complexity. So when we're thinking about, like, if you've done a certain build and then you've worked on the site for another 2 years, often the CFO or who's ever planning the money just, again, thinks of that initial project cost. So if you bought the site for $25,000, but over the next 5 years, invested another $10,000 per year, you've now spent $75,000 on the site, plus whatever internal time. So sometimes it's helpful for different people that are working on on the upper side of things. Well, this only cost us $25,000 last time. You're like, yeah, but we got, you know, this much of the site, and over the next 5 years, we made the site this big, and we want to rebuild it this big. So it's actually going to cost us the $75,000, or more or less, plus inflation and whatever else is happening. So sometimes with the CFO says, but we only spent 25 last time. I was like, well, that's true, but that was only for part 1. Part 2, 3, 4, 5, which makes up our whole website now with our single sign-on and our commerce and all this, is now $75K. So it helps people think that when you're selling it to your stakeholders, what's the actual cost, the total cost of ownership? I'm speaking a little faster. I didn't know how quick this would go. I do have some really strong technical folks who help with our D7 to D8 migrations. And I know that one of the big things that we've learned is that you can install migrate module, and it will do a huge lift for you to 8. It'll do about 40% of the lift, but you'll still need to go in. So a lot of people think that Drupal, they really, if you haven't worked from a 6 to a 7 or a 7 to 8 migration, stakeholders are shocked when I tell them it's not a one-press button. It's not like the Microsoft or the Apple where you put your phone on and an hour later it goes dark and it comes up again. No, Drupal 6 to 7, from 7 to 8 is work, right? So we've got this little formula where we look at how many content types, how many views, how many custom modules, and kind of give a ballpark of what that looks like. But generally there are some tools. And I don't know, Sean, do you have any other tools that would be from a technical side of things? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Well, that's fine. The biggest one we looked at was the migrate. That helped us basically get a lot of the content over. It helps us, as you mentioned, gets us a vast majority of the way there.
Yeah.
There is documentation on Drupal.org saying which specific modules have upgrade paths from 7 to 8. I would recommend that. Also looking at modules that were in 7 to do certain things, certain functionality, but there may not be an 8 version. So trying to figure out what does that path look like for you to kind of implement the same or similar feature.
Yeah. So what Sean was saying is yes, do the backup and migrate module. Also mapping modules. There's also something that we've realized is some of our clients, they say they want to go to 8, and when we start looking at the module suite, they're not ready, right? They're not ready. We do a contrib program where we match contrib with our clients to support movement forward on elements that they're not ready in the community. But some of our clients can't stomach even like sharing some of the costs to move things there. So we say, okay, no problem. Let's ice this and let's talk about it another 3 months, and then we'll watch it and we'll come up with a plan. So it really comes down to sometimes that if you've got a very complex site with lots of mapping or lots of customization that you feel that there will be something coming, it is worth it. Again, if you get results by not rushing and kind of map out what's ready and what's not, then you can make a more sustainable plan on how to move forward. Because I feel like most people are generally like, if you're in the development community or you're working you're coming to Badcamp, you're probably really jazzed about 8. Like, I love 8. It's so fun, right? It's so fun to get involved. It's so fun to build stuff. But the stakeholders who just spent a bunch of money on Drupal 7 are going, what? We have to spend a bunch of money again? I thought we just did this. So if you can come to them to say, hey, the average life site is 3 years. We've got 3 years until Drupal 7 end of life. Let's do a bunch on the strategy side of things to make sure that our messaging is correct, our user pathways are accurate. We're really doing what we need to do so we can minimize risk. And you can kind of say, let's spend the design time a bit like the strategy time now so that when we're really ready to move into 8 and we're going to do a big overhaul, that we know what works and what doesn't. And I feel that when you're talking to on the stakeholder level, they don't really care that 8's really cool and easy to use. They're like, yeah, but is it going to get me our admissions numbers up? Is it going to be able to increase our market penetration in this area? When you're talking to that C-level executive, they don't care if the tech's new. They just really want to know that they're going to get a good ROI on their investment. And so we can show good ROI, boots on the ground, by creating bigger impact with your website now, often by tweaking a few things. Some clients, like for example, we're going to move them to 8, but they really need a navigation change now. We need to make better user pathways now. And we know that their Drupal 8 site is coming in 6 months to a year, but we're still going to make those navigation update changes on 7 so we can see good impact. Because a year is a long time. 6 months to a year, you can do a lot in an organization. So really when we're coming up with these plans, it's like, yes, so you need to create a technical plan, you need to map everything, you need to organize everything. But fundamentally, we're humans working in a content management system for other humans. So really making that really easy to use, accessible, SEO friendly, making sure it's fast. Doing all these things on 7 is going to give you a leg up on when you move to 8. And if your site's a hot mess right now, it might be worth just throwing it out and going it on to 8. But I'm sure a lot of you have really stable, strong Drupal 7 sites that if you can get a couple more years out of it, a lot of times we found that clients have to do some fundraising, right? They weren't expecting to spend the money they need to spend to bring it to 8. So that allows you the next 1 to 2 years to create that and put it into the fiscal budget to help stakeholders understand. And I feel like it's one of those things that, again, we understand the need, but sometimes our boss doesn't. So showing impact of like, wow, look at all these amazing things that we got this site to do, and they're only going to be better in 8. But it helps them see the value of the website and the tool that it's being used for. And that's really a cool place to be when you can actually show progress today and say this is all going to be carried over or it's going to be improved as we move forward. So, okay, I've left about 10 minutes for questions. And again, welcome to book a solution session with me. And if you've got some really hard technical questions, I am on client side first. So I'll bring Sean or Sedino or whoever else. If you have UX questions, I always bring those folks in. So always happy to help. But any questions right out of the gate, or? Yeah.
How do you deal with even like Drupal 8, how Drupal 8 is moving functionality, like media or workflows? So I did a site early on using workflow module, now it's in core. So it's like I have to think about how that's going to move forward, because the workflow, the module that I've done is probably going to die on the line now.
Right. I think early adopters have to be available and open-minded about kind of reverting and organizing and moving forward again, because they feel like or being able to contribute and say, hey, this is a patch I want to submit or something. It's definitely, the earlier sites that we did on 8, you kind of have to like keep a real close eye on stuff and then, move with. It's kind of that match and meet pace again, right? So if we see something that's not there in Drupal 8, we might hold off on it or work with the Drupal 7 module maintainer to port it to 8 or stay up on the issue queue to figure out if it's coming in core releases. It's one of those things that you kind of I think you got to keep your finger on the pulse a little bit and kind of like, okay, you're doing that. I already did that. Shoot. Okay, well, I guess we'll pivot this way and organize that. But thank you for adopting early, because early adopters do push the issues forward and kind of move things. But yeah, we've got sites that are in Drupal 8, and when they found out Drupal 8 was end of life, they all started freaking out. Oh, I can't do this whole rebuild in 9 again. Oh, I just can't do this. I was like, don't worry. We're finally there. It's that push of a button. So being in 8's in a good place that you can make those small pivots knowing that you're not going to have to like rebuild in 8 or 9. So, cool. Yeah.
There's some features of D8 that help convincing them to go to 7 to 8. So it doesn't just feel like it's a line change. And just going, they don't get any benefits from going to 7 to 8. Is there like a short list of things that you tout with going to 8?
Yeah. First off, the user experience, like the editing experience, is much, much, much better, right? You don't have to install all these extra dashboards or total control or admin dashboard to actually have a good editor experience. Another one is accessibility. Like if people really care about accessibility, Drupal is leading the pack in terms of content management systems and accessibility. So if you're working with government, higher ed, anybody that requires AA compliance, it facilitates that so nicely and smoothly. Also, if you do handle internationalization in 8 is like, whoa, so amazing. A lot of it's in core, a lot of it's being able, the suite of modules is really strong. And there's also the element of just pure performance. And I think that it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. Like for some of our clients, they really want to be in Drupal 8 because they're so they want the editing experience. And then we have other clients that they don't even know why they need Drupal 8. They're like, why do I need Drupal 8? Can I just stay on 7? And honestly, what I say is, yeah, you can just stay on 7. There will be Drupal 7 long-term support providers for a long time. The issue may come over the long term with some of the modules may not be supported in 7. So you might want to look at that. But, you can probably stay in 7 for another 5 years and be totally fine. And if you've had your site for 3 years, it's like, well, now I've had 8 years of this site, so then now it's pure, it's probably looks dated, right? Or, so it's one of these things that not all of our clients will move to 8. Some of them will stay in 7 because they can't afford it, they don't want to, they don't understand it. It's working, their website's working for them. So the original name of this talk was if it ain't broke. And that's kind of the same thing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? If I start farting around with the toaster and it's working, it doesn't work anymore, right? So instead of causing that stress, leaving it on 7, there's no harm. right? As long as it hits your objectives, it does the SEO stuff, it does the accessibility, it hits those goals. As soon as it starts becoming hard to manage the actual organizational objectives, then I think, yeah, let's go for an overhaul. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming to my talk. I know I need to add a few more slides and stuff about more stuff, so I really appreciate any feedback you have. I'll be here for the next little bit, and thank you so much for coming to Backcount.